A researcher and a marketer with us. So, okay, so before we start, let's just take a few minutes to have a few more people join in. So 3rd May is approaching. What does everyone think? Are we going to be out of this lockdown or are not going to be? So let's put some answers down on the chat window.
Yeah, I think that's an exciting poll to have. How optimistic we are as a group.
Well, actually, the question should have been that, do you really want the lockdown to extend or do you want it not?
That's an interesting one.
That's nice. Okay.
That's a nice one. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Agree. I think Bombay, definitely the lockdown should extend. Definitely. Please don't step out. Nilesh, I think you should anyway keep your office guys at home. Anand, you too. You should be sitting at home, not have your team also come through.
There are days that I feel in love with work from home culture, but days that I want to move out. So it's a mixed feeling.
Well, I'm actually missing Starbucks coffee for sure.
Well, apparently they've started Starbucks coffee home delivery or something like that in Andheri.
Wow.
So folks on the on the chat who are in Andheri might want to try it out. But
Vishnu, you would want to come back now.
No. I think I'm pretty happy in Bangalore right now, I must say. I mean, looking at the situation in Bombay, I think I'm doing much well in Bangalore.
Awesome.
Like I was showing Anand, I was showing Nilesh the other day. The place where I'm staying, it has a private lane, and there is a good 200-meter walk to the main road, and that road is like completely empty. Nobody is there, so my evening walks actually happen there. So it's actually not so bad.
I think most of us here at least are under quite a lockdown situation. So I don't know about the rest of the folks on the chat, but I'm sure a fair amount are in a real lockdown where you can't step out of a building. But I think that's a good thing, right? I mean, all of us take that kind of precaution, then definitely this virus menace can be beaten and we can really get back to businesses and as usual, faster than what we could have expected.
Absolutely.
Some of my colleagues are saying we're missing office. I hope that's true.
Okay. So what are the answers coming into the poll?
Yes, some people are wanting the lockdown to extend. Some people are saying that, they definitely should extend, but they are missing office also.
Okay.
Cool, so good. I think the lockdown definitely should extend.
Sure.
Okay, so shall we start?
Absolutely.
Cool. So welcome everyone once again. If you have questions, please do raise your hands towards the end of the session and we will unmute you and you can ask a question in person to Anand. And for a brief introduction, Nilesh, over to you.
Oh, sure. Thanks. So today's topic is ever so relevant to every marketer and advertiser. UCID as an advertising agency has always been observing and studying the consumer behavior and trying to influence it with communication. Also, there are a lot of studies and published material on this topic, but there's nothing as valuable as hearing an expert who lives this topic day in and day out as a way of his life. So today's guest, Anand Bhatia, who's the CMO of Fino Payments Bank. He runs his marketing like a marathon for the long haul. Yeah,
absolutely.
And we've had an opportunity to work with him recently, and his insights and judgments have really helped shape up a great campaign, which has shown results and received much appreciation. So prior to this, Anand has been the co-founder of Ormax Money, which is India's most reputed firm for consumer behaviorists, which focuses on BFSI segment. Yeah, And he believes firmly in this adage of see what others see, hear what others hear, but try and think through differently. Yeah. So with that thought, over to you, Anand.
Oh, thank you so much, Nilesh. And as always, it's always been a pleasure working with your team, and it's fantastic to interact through this platform. Very, very warm welcome to everyone who's on this webinar right now. I promise to make this a very, very interesting session. This is your session. This is an absolutely interactive one. So which means that, through those chat windows, etc., please keep raising questions. Please keep saying stuff. So it just gets easier to build on a conversation. And whatever I'm going to discuss over the next some time, a lot of it is grounded in actual consumer behavior and actual observations and projects that I would have done over the last some years, and the experiences that have been picked up as a result of numerous field visits, being stuck in boardrooms to standing in the market and watching people buy. So everything very, very practical, a very, very practitioner's view of things is what we would do. And please roll in questions. I will answer them as honestly as I can. And if I don't know the answer, like a proper management guy, I could have the liberty of saying, one, it depends in a very grave way. The other thing which I will definitely do is come back to you with the answer, because the good part is that if I stand here today and I'm putting a point, it's courtesy a lot of background work or having worked with some really, really good people over the last some years whom I know I can dial back and say, hey, look, what would the answer be? And I know I'll get the right one. So the right answer is assured. It may take some time, but it'll definitely be there. And that's my commitment to you. Righto. So the topic for the day, right? Decisions. How do people really take decisions? Is it a long winded process of people thinking through several, parameters and then they come to a decision? Or does it just happen on the snap? Sometimes I'm sure as consumers, we would have all felt that, this object is calling out to me. I just want to pick this up, or intuitively the choice just comes to you like that. Now, just like that means that something has been happening in your mind. A set of rules have been running somewhere at the back of your mind. This is some logic that gives you an output that comes out just like that. It's almost like an algorithm, right? If you think of it at a very, very emotional level, with all the water content that we all have, we're probably just cucumbers who are capable of running some very, very good and very, very complex, extremely complex algorithms, which just has an impact on the way we decide. Very, very significantly. And I think this is very critical for all of us here on this in this session who are involved in any B2B businesses, is that even in B2B businesses, as far as decision making goes, it is often a small little algorithm running in somebody's mind. And once that guy has run, or that person has run those thoughts, he or she will figure out ways in the complex maze of B2B decision making, the rules, the procedures, the contracts, the negotiations, whatever have you, of wanting to work with you. But remember, at the end of the day, in every buying process, in every decision making process that people make as consumers, there are human beings involved, and people buy from people. Products, yes, are an important part of it, but people buy into an entire package. Everything that the product or the brand is saying out there is what matters, and that's how people go ahead and decide. But let's step back for a moment. Who are these people or these consumers that I'm constantly talking about? Of course, I would love to read, comments coming in, but I'll try and define this, consumer a little better for all of us. Consumer, would this be the person who pays the bill? Would this be the person who's actually buying the product? Or is consumer really somebody who's tipping the decision in the favor of that product versus that some other product? And sometimes the consumer may even have nothing to do with the product. So essentially the person making that tipping point or helping you go over that edge and say, hey, look, I want this, is the consumer. Let's look at some very real life examples. Some of us may have experienced this while going out shopping. I often call this the ghar ghar ki kahani, when we narrate this incident. So let's look at a typical case, and please don't get me wrong. If this has not happened to you, no problem. I'm sure it has happened to some. No biases meant here, nothing of that sort. But this is real stuff. So let's say husband and wife go out to buy a refrigerator. So they are at Vijay sales, right? Salesman typically would come and throw a lot of numbers at people, compressor, LED rating, this power consumption, the rate at which it cools. Oh, ice will be formed in 4 minutes and 72 seconds. Actually, somebody has actually told me that, data comes in, husband, wife will argue back and forth, cost, EMI, 0% finance, credit card, what do I do? Some kind of thing will start. And finally, they say, hey, let's go with the blue refrigerator. Now, why blue? Take a guess, right? It matches with the color of the curtain. That's it, right? I mean, who took that decision? Who tipped that decision was the real consumer in this case. I'll give you another one. A little more probably around the times now that since suddenly gold loans are really going to shoot through the roof. So let's say husband wants money to buy, grow his business and buy some more inventory. Let's assume this person is running a seasonal business, rains around the corner. So I want to stock up on stag umbrellas. What do? I say, okay, I want a gold loan because it's flexible, fast. There is gold in the family. So what does this guy do? He'll go and check out 2-3 financiers. He check ROI. What loan amount am I likely to get? The guy is still thinking about it. He's done all sorts of financial parameters. And when he turns to the missus might just actually say, hey, look, let's go to the local jeweler. I really trust him. I can get you the best deal over there that probably an organized, gold loan company may not get. Well, there you have. She's the real consumer. She's the one who tipped the decision, right? And sometimes this consumer who is taking this decision or tipping the decision is not always self-evident. Let's look at classic example of paints. And I'm going to really run a quick poll over here. Who in the family buys the paint, right? Is it the guy or is it the lady of the house? Quick question to everyone. Your windows are open. Would really, really love to see an answer to this. Who buys in the paint? Okay. I can quickly see some of the right answers coming in. Yep. I think this seems to be totally unanimous if I'm reading the chat. And all hands down, yes, absolutely. It's the lady who buys paint. It's the husband who probably just picks it up, or nowadays you get it home delivered, right? Okay, what about cement? Interesting category, right? So, okay, cement. Who buys cement? Okay, so I can see the friends out in the list. Okay, I can see it's seemingly a very, very male category. Well, said, that's where there could be certain surprises, right? I mean, and there's a lot of research that shows that, while yes, at times the engineer is the one who's, really, influencing you. In fact, if you notice, a lot of the good ads which are featuring engineers today have women in them. But very often it's a lady of the house who starts influencing this decision. Why? Because they consume media far better. They are emotionally far more invested in the house than the guy is. For the guy, it's a house. Very often for the lady, it's the home. There's a very, very strong emotional angle. And that's why in very, very often, and especially when you have, what's called the individual home builder. So people are building a small bungalow somewhere in a rural area. For those who stay in a large apartment complex, you really have no idea what cement has gone into your building. But if you are building a small little house in my favorite part of the country, Darbhanga, somewhere in Bihar, with a mango tree nearby and a river flowing nearby, it's very, very likely that the lady of the house is pushing that direction. So the consumer is not always self-evident. The consumer is the person who's tipping the decision in the favor. And very often, as we saw in the, the blue refrigerator example, the decision may be fairly non-rational. Okay, let's stay with the consumer. Let's stay with this little element of being a little non-rational. And I'll run a next critical question. Why do kids like McDonald's? What do you think is going on in the kid's mind when the kids, reaching out for that McD at a food court or, even in a standalone McDonald's? Would really, really love to know. So, okay, I can see the, Happy Meal, toy, Ron McDonald's, colors. Okay, very, very interesting. Yep, a lot of people actually believe that this is the case. But, okay, toy fries. Now I can see answers that really, really are hitting the nail on the head. Absolutely, that's a good one somewhere that we're hearing the word fries. Now, let's build on that, right? Okay, so now I'm sure that a lot of answers are going to come around the fries where people forget the burger, but yep, fries actually play a very important role in this decision making. Now let's look at this entire thing from a kid's decision making perspective. What is a kid really? And here I'm talking about a kid like, 5-year-old, a 7-year-old. What is this person really craving for? Right? Control, right? Because very often you don't have control at that age, right? Somebody else is deciding a lot of things for you. Ease of access, ease of handling. So that's where, the fries really come in. They're very easy to handle. It's a very individual food, right? So this is my stuff. I ain't sharing it. Ease of choice. I have 2 or 3 options. I just say, this is what I want. So there is, choosing is so easy. It's not a menu card that has got 40 things, on it and, millions of permutations, combinations possible. 3-4 items, take and go. But very importantly, there are no surprises in a McDonald's food. It tastes the same everywhere in the world. There's only one gentleman I know who claims that he can identify a McDonald's outlet by tasting the MACD in it, because he claims to have eaten in about 942 MACD outlets across the US, Europe, and India. I think he's joking. But the reality is, because MACD food has no surprises, nothing can go wrong. Kids at that age hate surprises when it comes to food. So the kids' decision making is as simple as, I have control. This is a food where I have, no chance of surprise, no nasty surprises, no shock. It's easy to choose. Bingo, MACD it is and go. I'll share an interesting trivia, with you as far as a McDonald's outlet goes. The height of the counter in a McDonald's outlet is the same wherever you go in the world. So that is the level of standardization. That is how much they take ambiguity out of the equation. No surprises. Wherever you go, it's the same thing. It's the same taste. It's the same product. It's the same height of the counter, 90 centimeters on the ground. So which means that even a 4 or a 5-year-old can happily stand there and order, which means control in that person's hand, right? So the kids' decision-making algorithm was so rooted into things that really matter for them: control, ease of handling, ease of choice, and very importantly, absolutely no surprises. And as a father of now a teenager, I've actually seen this process. Done a lot of my experiments on my own son at times in terms of consumer behavior. Please don't ever tell my past clients that. Fair. Right. Okay. So kicking on, now that we have a sense of who this consumer is and certain examples of decision making, let me talk about another very interesting example. And since I come from the financial services space, let me talk about something very interesting that I've seen when we were testing a communication for a mutual fund. Right? So everybody assumes that mutual fund as a category, consumers are going to be incredibly rational, very well informed. They want to get into all sorts of details. And you know what? The decision-making process is actually going to involve people sitting and analyzing nice complicated words like Sharpe ratio. Believe me, I really don't understand it, but there is something like that. So we actually went back to consumers and said, hey, look, here's some communication. We showed them a lot of schemes which had fantastic returns. What's the word I'm looking for? CAGR, right? CAGR that was in 80%, 90%, no matter what. But what we figured that the consumer's decision-making process when it came to investing was simple. The guy was just simply looking for consistency of returns. So while advertisers were pushing, rate of return and stuff like that, the consumer was looking for something very different, because what that guy was looking for was consistency of returns. So sometimes what seems very rational to us as advertisers is not the way the consumer is thinking, because more often than not, decision making for consumers is an incredibly non-rational process and driven by what I call thumb rules. So essentially a thumb rule is nothing but some algorithm, some factor which is running in your mind, which will help you, or which will allow you to take a decision in a very quick manner without getting into too much details. Why? Because, come on, face it. The reality is that details are difficult to handle, difficult to comprehend, and in more often than not, in the categories that some of us work in, details just get plain outright, either boring or incredibly scary. So in that case, what are you really going to do? You are going to work out a procedure that works for you. So it actually leads us to this whole theory around biases, right? A bias is nothing but your own shortcut of dealing with a situation. So when we often say that, we have biases for somebody, against somebody, what are you really doing? You are working a small little piece of logic somewhere in your mind based on something that has happened that helps you take a decision about that person, that place, that event. And believe me, all of us do this at every single point in time. Right now, you are listening to me. Somewhere at the back of your mind, basis past experiences, the way I'm dressed, the way I'm saying things, the way, the way my hands are moving, maybe my background, maybe the stuff that I've said as of now, you've somewhere started making some, decisions, or certain thoughts about me have already emerged. Why? Because again, somewhere there is a logic that runs behind, which is based on, there are about 30, 35 odd biases. If you actually start studying them, you realize that basis somewhere there, you've already started making decisions about, this person, how this chat is going to go, what's going to happen, right? When we've done a lot of consumer research, so one is, the consumer research part. And secondly, which is very fascinating, is that, over the last 2 years, spent a lot of time traveling into rural markets. With Fino, I've actually gone to places which were difficult to find on a map. Sat there, had chai and samosas with consumers, and that's really led me to conclude that no matter where you go in the country, which strata of society you talk to, what language they come from, what background they come from, everybody is basically using around 4 or 5 odd rules when it comes to the kind of products that they are consuming in their everyday lives. So let me introduce each and every one to them. These are things, again, gleaned with a lot of field insight. Believe me, these are results of endless hours of tea with consumers. Okay, but at this stage, I think we take a very, very natural break of what we've discussed. Very, very happy to see if there are any questions around this. I really love the enthusiasm with which answers came in on the lady of the house buying the paint, to the whole discussion on cement and the kids. But at this stage, I think it'll be very natural to take 1 or 2 questions really on whatever we've covered so far in terms of the consumer and some of the decision-making cases that we have done. So happy to pause for about 30 seconds and just waiting for a question or two to pop up. And then we can move on to some of those algorithms that I think are really the heart of this particular discussion. So taking a 30-second break and sort of looking at my screen if there are questions popping up at this stage.
Anand, some smart advertiser once said that look at your consumer as a wife. And I think today you justified that because behind every purchase, even cement, there's the lady of the house influencing it.
And it's the other way around also, right? I mean, a lot of people believe that, for example, medicine is a category where it's, often it's, the guy who's really, the tipping point and the decision maker. So while care as a sentiment is associated more with the lady of the house, but more often than not, it's the male member who really tips the decision and says, hey, look, let's go ahead with this, because, years of conditioning, hierarchy, or, the belief that this guy probably is better exposed. I think, helps him really do that.
There are some questions. Yeah.
Okay, so I think let me see 1 or 2 of the interesting questions that have really, come in. So there's one which says, "What do women want?" Boss, I think I don't think anybody has an answer, right? I mean, one will have to really, be God in that sense. So, but I guess the best way to really know, okay, as Nish said, is talk to your significant other and actually observe behavior. So probably the best way of understanding consumers or even decision making is in a very, very normal way, stand in a shop, in a marketplace, and just see what's happening around you. Of course, you have to be a little careful, otherwise you might come across a little creepy. But if you just hang around and be like a fly on the wall, really, get a good stuff. But you can see one interesting question here. While entering a new product, should one focus on the rational, tangible benefits, or should we or should the biases be the focus? I think a very good question, Tanpreet. What actually happens is that anything that is incredibly rational at times, unfortunately, times lends itself to a number. And then you kind of tend to get stuck with something. But something which is far more rooted in emotion will always win. I mean, no sugary, syrupy stuff, of course. But because remember, consumers often forget what you've done for them, but they'll always remember the way you make them feel. So if you have that, that the non-rational or the intangible benefit of what the product does for them, it becomes very, very easy to establish a relationship. Otherwise, you get pegged to a number. And at times when we are pegged to a number, life can get a little complicated, because the next guy will come across and say, hey, look, so let's say you say that, look, I'm going to deliver in, 30 minutes. Somebody's going to get up and say 25 minutes, or I'm going to give you a 10% discount. Somebody will say, 15%. So there is no end to it. But when it's an emotion, when it is rooted in something that really matters to a non-rational way of thinking, then you've taken your product to a different level. Okay. Now, while there are questions there, and believe me, we'll take all those things. I'm sure there's a way we can even come back to you individually to respond. So now I kind of move to the rules that I was really talking about. So again, the first fundamental rule that consumers often use is that if they can think of a brand easily, they tend to buy into that brand, right? Now I know it sounds very, very simple, but at the heart of that is this whole sentiment of positioning. If you have positioned yourself very, very clearly, if you have told your consumer that, look, you need to think of me like this, you need to think of me as, let's say, reliable. So that's something like, certain banks do very, very well, right? For example, we ourselves in our bank have been very, very clear on our positioning that, we are the bank which is right next door. We are the bank that can come to your house at the press of a button. So give the person a very, very clear reason. So if a consumer can think of you, the consumer is going to buy into you. And here is the secret. If a brand can become a verb, it self-selects, right? I mean, look at the platform that we are on. I mean, today, Zoom is a verb, right? I mean, let's say, hey, it's to Zoom almost like Xerox was, or, a couple of the payments things have been, or even LIC at times have been, to LIC, stuff like that. So moment the two and the brand can come together, becomes a verb, you're there, it's self-selected. But the basis really on that is that if the consumer can think of you easily, if you've given the consumer a hook, then that's it. If he's thought of you, the guy is going to buy. So first is, if the guy can think of you, he's going to buy. And that's how the decision making goes. If the consumer knows how to think of you, it's quite likely that the guy is going to buy from you. Second, which is, I think, very critical, is past experience, as simple as that. And past experience does not necessarily mean own first-hand experience. Even second-hand is fine. What have I heard about you? How closely your current proposition, or what is it that you're telling me, reminds me of something previous. My own experience, experience from somewhere else, these immediately start creating positive or negative connotations. And this is very, very important in the, especially for products or brands where there is a person going out and selling. So what is my past experience with this person? Oh, when I went into this branch, this happened. No, I don't trust them. They never give me correct information. Maybe that guy did not give you correct information in an absolutely different context, but you will connect it to the current context in which he or she is speaking. So past experiences, either own or secondhand, that is somebody else's experiences, become a very, very easy thumb rule. Whatever this guy is saying matches something I have experienced in the past. Good guy, buy, or bad guy, do not buy. Third one, and this is something you would have seen very often in your retail environment. Very often, we tend to go back to the first salesman who told us about that product. Why? Because very often it was that first guy who said something that we understood. So a quick algorithm always for consumers is that you tend to go back and buy from people whom you understand, people whose offer is something that you comprehend. So which is why framing of the offer, framing of whatever it is that you are selling is so critical. I'll give an example from banking. Banks often tend to tell customers that, I will give you a loan with a conditional pre-approval, or some nice fancy MBA kind of language. Consumer really doesn't understand that, right? But if you tell the consumer, hey, look, you got the loan, you know what, you're already in, okay, I know these COVID times and sometime little later travel is out of the question, but let's say, you've got this loan and you know what, you wanted to go to Hawaii and you're there and you're having, pineapple juice under the coconut tree. If you can visualize that, if you can comprehend that and mentally you're there in Hawaii sipping that pineapple juice, you are going to take the loan. Okay? So you will tend to go with the offer or to the person whose statements, whose way of speaking, whose logic, or whatever it is that they tell you, you understand. So it becomes very, very critical as another thumb rule that consumers use. They buy from people whom they understand. And the fourth one, which I think is really, the heart of a lot of decision making, is that consumers inherently have an aversion to ambiguity. All of us have that. In a lot of things that we do, you always want to know, what's next. So you do, in any buying process, you really opt for a brand, or work with a person, go with a company, interact with people where there is a certain amount of predictability. So it's the classic Hero Honda case, right? What did Hero Honda do? They just said, fill it, shut it, forget it. They really told you what to expect. They made it very, very predictable, and suppose this is all there is to it. And you look at your own purchase, process. When companies tell you what the next step in the buying process is, you are that much more likely to buy. Why? Because it's taken that fear of, really don't know what to do next out of the equation. What's impressive is that this sentiment works with not only, the most evolved of consumers and the most articulate of consumers, but it works equally well with literally that example I gave, Darbhanga, highway, mango tree, river, below the tree, there's a small house. That consumer there, it works with that consumer also. Because very often consumers will struggle to have a plan B because there is dissonance, it's not worth it, money is precious. So anyone who tells me as a consumer, what's next, what will happen, what's the next step, the decision automatically gets made. So these are typically the 4 odd thumb rules that I've really seen that consumers use. And this, as a practitioner, when working on problems and projects, consulting life with Ormax, right now with Fino, we've used a lot of these principles to in product design, in communication, in advertising, in creating the right messaging, and campaigns, the works really. Give the person a way to think of you. So if the guy can think of you, he can hold you in his or her mind, the decision becomes that much more clearer. If the person has had a good experience with you on or somebody else's, decision making is very, very clear. Or if you can, in your conversation with that person, link it to experiences that he or she has had, then they just connect the dots and it builds confidence. Very critical if they can understand what you're saying, if the offer makes sense, if it's comprehended, or like the loan example that I gave, if the guy can visualize the end use, the guy's bought into it. And fourth, very, very critical thumb rule really is this whole aversion to ambiguity, that if I know what the next steps are, if I know that uncertainty is taken care of, then I will go ahead and buy. So that's why predictability becomes the key. Remember that child and McDonald's? The key there was predictability, no nasty surprises, right? I mean, I don't want some funny thing, because grown-ups eat a lot of funny food where the taste can be, whatever, right? But for a kid, this is very, very critical. So this is something which I have learned as a practitioner over a lot of years, meeting consumers, spending time with them, watching buying behavior, solving problems as the thumb rules behind decision making. So what matters for us as marketers everywhere is that taking into account that decision making is non-rational, it's based on thumb rules, it's not going to be a long, complicated process. And if you've appealed to that person through some of these thumb rules, he or she will find reasons to buy from you. Then you could be premium priced, do that, because once the person is convinced that you are the person they want to buy from, as I said, they will find ways to work with you. They will find ways to buy. That is essentially what I wanted to talk about as far as thumb rules and decision making goes. And I can actually see it on my chat window. This very interesting question by Anmol, which says, on the rural consumers and their behaviors and the products they buy. Believe me, Anmol, the only difference that I've often seen between rural and urban customers is really around articulation, maybe a little bit in terms of exposure on certain kinds of products. But in terms of that buying behavior, the 4 rules that I was talking about often hold over there. In fact, that customer is incredibly sophisticated. Whether it is consumption of OTT, financial services, consumer goods, there is a very, very important and interesting algorithm running in their mind, and the difference really is more the station of life they are in, the stage of life, rather than physically where they are. Right. Again, I think Karthik has a nice question, right? When it comes to brick and mortar versus online, how do the differences go? These 4 rules apply in a lot of places. The difference between online and offline is more the medium. The rules of marketing, the thoughts of marketing are largely going to be the same. In fact, if you actually look at the online business, when there has been absolutely no difference between brands, they fought a price war. But moment you give the consumer a way to think of you, moment you give the consumer, you kill certain aspects of uncertainty, then the willingness to go and buy from that brand may actually beat the reason to give crazy discounts. So, because otherwise, if discounting was the only way out, then many of these brands would be in worse trouble than what they are. Right? Okay. So let me see. Yeah, I think Ranjit makes a very, very good point that experiences and emotional connect is what really works. And if you look at a lot of stuff, look at banking, highly commoditized, right? But there are so many instances that all of us would have experienced. And I personally, would love to tell a story of a customer who had started using mobile banking. Mobile banking is incredibly commoditized. So here was this customer of, in a place called Yakubpur. Yakubpur is somewhere in eastern UP, western UP. This guy was illiterate, and he had actually adapted to using mobile banking. Why? Because one guy in the local branch had actually taught him how to use it and had made him confident about the entire procedure of using mobile banking, and had given him a use case which said that, look, sir, even if it's raining, there are bad weather conditions, you know what, you can do this transaction from wherever you are. So the emotion really was this guy making this consumer feel confident about banking. After that, the guy used mobile banking for one reason only. That's it. But that emotion that came in, the emotion of confidence that the branch guy gave to this customer in wanting to use mobile banking, really, really won the day and converted a person who was an illiterate vegetable seller, hardworking guy, to start using a platform that he was actually not very, very comfortable with. So rural consumers actually do a great job of learning by use cases very, very well. And their decision making is really based on use cases. Because for them, plan B at times is a luxury that, time-wise or resources-wise, they really find it difficult to handle. Okay, so I can see Crystal with the question. You're talking about the product features, pulling in customers. How can we as marketers work with that? Yeah, of course, see product, product features, yes, are going to be critical. But remember, people don't buy a product because of, that feature in it. They buy it for what it will do for them. So the key really there is saying that, look, if my product has this particular feature, which could be, let's say, it, as a, cliched ads go that, it will give you long hair or something, right? So, and nowadays with the barber shutdowns, we are all stuck, all who do long hair syndromes happening everywhere. So if the product feature really is, it has some chemical that gives me long hair, but once you start convincing that other person that, hey, look, long hair means, more attractiveness, more friends, more whatever, that's what they're really buying into it, right? Yeah, so again, I think Pratik has a very valid point. So, what's in it for me? That's, again, yeah, very critical, right? So if that's where the whole experience part comes in, that, what's in it for me, because the guy compares it to something in the past and then goes ahead and buys. So, you start realizing that, actually, irrespective of the product category, the rules involved in decision making or buying are fairly similar. And that's really, I think, the beauty of consumer behavior, that what changes are probably some nuances, some aspects because of regulation, etc. But fundamentally, people will buy from people. People will buy from brands that they can understand, whom they can hold in their head. They will buy from brands whose experience they can relate to. They'll buy from brands whom they can understand. They will buy brands that will kill ambiguity and will help them understand what the next step is, and will make them feel safe and secure, or rather confident, as for a very BFSI perspective. It really boils down to that. But then whether it's cement, whether it's a credit card, whether it's insurance, whether it's a home, they all actually fall in the same category, right? So, guys, this is what
I want to have a conversation on one of the aspects of marketing that today all of us are really using to a very great deal, whether it is really BFSI or non-BFSI, doesn't really matter. So influencer marketing. Today, influencer marketing is catching up like wildfire.
Absolutely.
There are brands who are using influencer marketing not only as a celebrity endorsing a particular brand or a particular product, etc., but it's also about today the YouTubers or the influencers on Instagram, etc., Twitter are being used for brand promotion. How much of it do you think adds value to consumer behavior? I mean, as consumers, yes, we all know that, if somebody tells me something, I will still probably consider. So is it still ending towards a consideration set, or is it even influencing their buying purchase?
So, micro influencers very, very clearly start influencing your buying behavior. So, let's look at, I mean, I'm sure there are folks here who are into running, for example, I am. When you talk to somebody in that running community who says that, hey, look, I buy this brand of shoes, or I use this, or, or something, this guy is going to talk about, it definitely influences your decision to buy, because what you're doing is, it's a secondhand experience, right? Saying that people like me tend to do this. Now, brands can make very, very good use of these influencers who are very often people like you and me. I mean, it's not always a celebrity. It's somebody whom you can relate to, because, whatever is it that they say, or, they talk, or the way they put themselves out on some of these platforms makes you realize that, yeah, this guy is like me. And, oh, this person like me does things like that. So I will also benefit if I do things like that. So that's where really, the whole influencer part really comes in. It need not necessarily always be Deepika Padukone or, Mahendra Singh Dhoni, but it could be some person in a network whose views really matter. And I see a lot of this happening. I mean, that's why in a lot of ways, platforms like TikTok have been pretty successful in, influencing buying behavior, because you're seeing something very relatable of people whom you kind of relate to, buying into products that make sense for you. So I think very big, and again, that's a good, decision-making algorithm, right? People like me tend to do this. I mean, comparative filtering, right? I mean, Amazons of the world have made a killing on this by telling you that people like you bought products like that. What does that really do? It actually gives you a little nudge and says, okay, I've bought this. Let me also buy that. So it's you filling up your basket and some, dollars and a lot of money ringing for somebody somewhere else by a simple nudge. So influencers really end up giving you that nudge.
Great, thanks, Anand. So guys, any more questions? Please raise your hands. We will unmute you and you can ask your question in person.
Question from our friend Mihir. Okay. And he asks, in a category where the decision making is longer, okay, what can a brand do to shorten the tenure or reduce the process of decision making? And how can it work to avoid the dropouts during decision making?
That's a very good question. Right. So if you look at high ticket purchases often, or, a very, very complex thing, some buying earth moving equipment, okay, which might, have to go through a lot of loops and, the trials and tests and da. So, by nature itself, the whole evaluation procedure might be really, really long. But that's where, if that guy has, shortlisted you basis some of those, people buying from people, or, the way you have addressed his or her concern every time, you've preempted questions and you've said, okay, your next question is likely to be this, and this is, how we would go about it, made it very, very clear how the whole, next steps are going to progress. If that is, and that, you've addressed that fear of failure in that choice, then the buying process definitely goes faster. And it could be for, high-end machinery, it could be buying, consulting practices. If, as I said earlier also, right, if you've given that guy that hook initially, the person will find reasons to buy from you. So then the buyer will do all the homework and, all the hard work of running around to actually hasten the process because he or she wants to buy from you. Why? Because you probably, addressed at times that one reason for buying. I mean, it could be as simple as, if you get this piece of equipment for your company, you know what, the company will do very well, and the entire board will, applaud you for it. Okay, so for a moment, leave aside anyone, bribing or, all that kind of stuff. So let's not have that. But if it is as straight as that, and that could be that, the way that person thinks that, hey, wow, if I do this, you know what, this guy seems, I can place my faith in this guy, and I would buy from him because it will get me a lot of, claps in the boardroom. Believe me, the guy is going to, push your case and things will move pretty fast. So that's how you accelerate, like generating that sense of confidence. The more confident you make your buyer feel, the faster he or she will take that decision. And, the less confident they are, then obviously there are reasons to look around, keep, toggling here and there till they kind of come up with a decision. So the key is confidence.
Okay. There is a question from Jay, so I'm going to let him speak himself.
Awesome.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, Jay.
Hi, sir. So I had this question about the first thumb rule which you mentioned, that if you can think of a brand easily, then they might tend to buy it. So if there's a new brand which is trying to get into a competitor category, so how will it work for them?
Okay, you're right. I mean, very often you're up against competitors who've been there for a while. They have far higher marketing budgets. They've been saying a lot of things. So then in that case, one, you have to be very, very clear that what is that one reason why somebody should want your product. So what will your new product, which has come out in the market, do, which is either unique or it is unfailing, and very clearly identify whom you're going to talk to. So if you look at, a lot of successful brands that would have come in, quietly and, done, gone on to make a big name. They've actually done that part very, very well. So you're faced with a lot of competition, but you've just focused on that one thing that you do and just do it well without, tom-tomming yourself. It just then starts creating your first bunch of consumers who start saying, hey, look, this makes sense. Look, I'm going to buy it. Then the experience kicks in, and then slow and steady. Overnight obviously is not going to happen. As we all joke, right? I mean, there's nothing called an overnight success. So, it just is about being very, very clear that as a new entrant into the market, very clearly identify who is this consumer I want to talk to, not necessarily demographics, also the psychographics. What is it that I'm going to do or my product do that is either unique or unfailing, and how it will impact his life. So basically that means getting the kind of product positioning right. And once you've done that, it just gets a little easy to fight a battle against an incumbent.
You have one more question from Rishi. Yeah.
Hi, Anand. It was a good session. I just want to understand from, can you hear me?
Yes, Rishi.
So I just want to hear from you in terms of the pre-COVID and the post-COVID scenario. How do you think the marketing strategies of companies, especially in the BFSI segment, will change? Because a lot of them are looking at digital, but in digital, because there is no physical experience one would get. So how would one bank differentiate with the other on the digital strategy, even if we look at a different strategy post-COVID?
So again, Rishi, here, given that these are slightly turbulent times, and people really don't know what to expect, what is next, how things are changing, the core success is going to be around this whole thing of killing ambiguity. If I can keep telling my consumer, hey, look, this is what you can expect, or this is the next step, and making it very, very clear, I think that is one big battle that everyone has to fight. Second battle that, especially in the BFSI context, that all of us will have to fight is ensuring that whatever we tell the consumer, because remember now in the post-COVID environment, a lot of effort or time and energy of the customer is really going to go in terms of clawing back in terms of life. So if this person, and banking is something which is, while it's very, very important, I think people pay more attention to the shampoo they buy than to the insurance policy that they buy, right? Because the shampoo is so much more easier to comprehend compared to a life insurance plan where you can't understand what the guy writes in the document. So making that whole thing incredibly simple, where the guy just says, "Hey, I get it," is going to be the next big battle. So killing ambiguity and making it easy for the person to understand. And actually, if you look at it, all the four pillars really, really hold, right? Because experience that will speak for itself. I think if these three things happen, more than anything else, killing ambiguity and just making your offer, the communication, or the next steps so simple and intuitive that the guy gets it, is going to be where this battle is won. Are these things very, very new? Probably no. But I think this is a great time where a lot of this will get revisited, and brands that do a good job of it, I think we stand to gain disproportionately. And that's where me as a CMO would really focus on.
Great.
Yeah.
Neha, do you have a question?
I can see some.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Anand. This was a great session. I think the question that I was supposed to ask is already in the message. I was asking because the attention span is so low these days. How do I make someone fall in love with the brand, or, even consider me as a brand? Say, suppose in a banking sector. So as you said, brands create this quality where the customer feels that, okay, this is nice, and then they refer. Like OnePlus as an example, they came and they did have this community now. People feel proud to be in it.
Absolutely.
But like brand, BFSI sector, for example, how do I target youth who does not really care about which bank they want to go with, but I would want the community factor to be there also. So is there any way I can do that, or is that just something I can't beat?
No, it's not that it can't be done. See, at the end of the day, if you look at, okay, so let's take this, segment, right? So-called millennial, or, the post-millennial, whatever you want to call them. Now, then the segment is actually pretty open to, community as a thought. So if you look at this segment, what are those things that they would want, or would they would bond around, that a bank can give? Now, I also know very, very clearly that, look, my bank is not my best buddy. That's reality, right? I'm not going to hang around with my bank RM, nor am I going to visit the bank branch to have a cup of coffee. So that's not happening, right? If my bank is talking to me or giving me things that at that stage of my life are very relevant to me. So which could be, again, I'm just, thinking that guys just started working, and easy access to maybe a used two-wheeler or, used car loan that comes in, very, very easily without the guy having to jump through so many loops. Because I know that largely this guy is going to go from home, whatever, works for an IT company and is going to drive down to his parents' place in Pune on the weekends. When I know a lot of that, I know where the guy is spending, I have some data on him, and I say, okay, look, I probably know what the guy is up to. So let me give this guy a loan because, I have so much of background info. So giving access to products which are very relevant at that life stage is where then you start creating those, consumers who start getting interested in you. But you've got to realize is that that segment, I mean, the one that you're really referring to, really does not think of bank as their best friend, and the bank branch as a place that they would hang out. So things that matter at that stage in life, once that starts coming, okay, that is where that whole community gets created. And I've seen this in when traveling in rural markets, or current role that I handle, or even in the past, when that consumer starts seeing that use case, that this is why I should sign up with this guy. And this happens even when it comes to salary accounts, or folks signing up in Darbhanga somewhere, or all of us. If you start giving me something that matters to me at that stage in my life, without making me jump through loops, that's where the affinity comes in, and it starts going beyond commodity. Because
Okay.
today, because you know so much about me nowadays, right? Which was really not there 5, 7, or even even 5 years ago. It was very difficult to have that much info on the customer. But today, look at the amount of info that we have, and I'm talking about legally. So that's where the ability to come up with that offer for that one single guy will start mattering. It's pretty difficult to do, but that's
Doable.
in that path. It starts paying dividends.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
Okay. Nilesh, there are a lot of questions on the chat. So, is there a way, if later on over email or whatever, or combine this thing, an answer can be created and shared with a wider audience?
Yeah, we can compile the entire chat.
I think that'd be nice.
Yeah. Great. So, any more questions?
I can still see
I see Jay Kishan.
Jay.
Hello, sir.
Hi, Jay.
Sir, I want to connect to that point which ma'am said about the influencers, and the second thumb rule which you mentioned about visualizing. So if ma'am mentioned about celebrity endorsement, and there are other people also who actually are influencers, and how influencers are actually affecting the brand. So do you think having those influencers which are not kind of celebrities, and those who are normal, they will actually help them to get a better visualization, because they are able to think more from a normal consumer point of view rather than a celebrity point of view. So why do those brands will still go for a celebrity rather than a normal person who can influence a person more?
Okay, I think that's a brilliant question. So why a celebrity? Because inherently the whole idea is that a celebrity breaks through the clutter. So, and there is a lot of science that goes behind matching the attributes of a brand with the attributes of a celebrity. So if, for example, you are okay, a bank, it's pretty unlikely that you will take a celebrity whose only claim to fame could be being incredibly rough and tough and bashing up people. Okay, but probably that kind of a guy you might want to go in with a far more physical brand, which is a more outdoorsy kind of a brand. So that way, when well chosen, a celebrity definitely helps break through clutter. That said, we all know that Kareena Kapoor does not wipe the furniture in her house with Lysol or whatever that right now people would be claiming. So you know that ain't happening. So somewhere the credibility angle definitely comes in, depending on the kind of product. So again, that's where a lot of the micro influencer part comes in. That's where when brands run these little programs that say, hey, look, use my product somewhere and talk about it. And when you read that, you say, hey, look, this person I know does this, so it's probably good enough for me, or is good for me. So the local or the micro influencer is definitely here to stay. Your big budget, big bang celebrity influencers are largely for clutter breaking and just bringing it to your attention. But for a lot of products, it will be the guy next door and his or her influence that is actually going to prompt buying. And the good part is that the current kind of platforms, TikTok, ShareChat, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, etc., gets you in touch with this audience, right? And brands are going to keep using this to convince you to buy their product.
So Anand, I'd like to add a little bit on this one as well. See, celebrity endorsements and using a celebrity in marketing, etc. It really also depends on the way you use the celebrity. It is not. There are two ways to use a celebrity. One is to say that a brand uses the celebrity as a protagonist to play a particular part in a certain storytelling that you have to do via a TVC or a video, etc. Or the other way is to use an endorsement. So it very largely depends on how you are using a celebrity, be it BFSI or non-BFSI, in terms of how the celebrity adds to the brand or does not add to the brand. The most easiest shortcut today, most brands think of using is to use a celebrity as an endorsement because it's like saying that if Axis Bank uses Deepika Padukone, they're going to have a spike in the top of mind recall, etc., and multiple others. I mean, Amitabh being used by ICICI in the past, etc. So it largely depends on how the celebrity is used versus endorsement and playing a role in advertising.
No, absolutely. And if the celebrity, there's a fit with the kind of product. So for example, that, let's say if it comes to give an example of a running shoe. If Dhoni or, Bolt says that, hey, look, this is something which is very, very good. The fit is so good, you'll say, yeah, it makes sense. Or, if this is what Bolt wore when he, ran in the Olympics, you'd say, okay, fine. I mean, I may never win the Olympics, but, I would still believe that, okay, it's going to give me that little extra, whatever. So that's how that fit becomes very, very critical. It has to be believable. When the celebrity is believable and associated with that brand, makes a lot of sense. And as you said, that, part of the story. So which is why the brand archetype, the celebrity archetype, etc., starts becoming very critical, so that fit happens. And it's a far better and a very credible story that resonates with the end customer.
Cool. So I think that's the amount of time that we have today. So thanks everyone for joining in, and thank you so much, Anand, for giving us this time.
Thanks so much. An absolute pleasure. And as Nilesh would love to really have those points compiled and would love to start mailing out answers. It may take some time, but I'll do it.
Sure. We'll get you all the questions, and thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Full insights, even for from an advertising perspective. Really great insights.
No, cool. Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody for being on the panel. It was a pleasure. Have a nice day. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.